let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Modernize and Extended Legacy Apps in the Cloud workshop. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. My name is Marcy Samuelson. I am Marketing Manager for the Developer Initiative here at Oracle, and I'll be your guide and moderator for today's workshop. I'm very excited to show you some innovative new technologies that you can take advantage of in the Oracle Cloud to modernize and extend your legacy applications. During this workshop, we will have a number of cloud engineers to help you as you go through the hands-on material. We have Varun, Keegan, Wilson, and Steve, who are experts in this area and will provide demos on the labs and answer any questions that you have. Here's the agenda. Today we will cover the lab infrastructure, have you sign up for a free trial, set up your cloud environment, configure your autonomous transaction processing instance, and build some Java REST services. We will spend about 2 hours in today's session covering the setup and performing Lab 1 and 2. You may not complete all the exercises today during this live workshop, but don't worry. Please work on these exercises at your own pace, and you can ask questions as you go, or we will provide you with a way to get answers to your questions after the workshop. If you complete all the labs we plan to cover during this live session, feel free to continue with some of the optional labs. If you already have a cloud account, great. You may use that to complete the lab. If not, we will have you sign up for a free tier account in today's session. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Varun, who will do an overview of the lab infrastructure.
Thanks, Marcy. Let me just walk you through the infrastructure and what we will be doing in this workshop. So if you look at the bottom left corner, what we see is the monolithic application, assume running on-premise. In this workshop, we will break the application and containerize it and store the data into the autonomous database. Also, we will have our source code for the application in the GitHub, which will be in the Visual Builder Studio. Then we will containerize our application and push the Docker image into the OCIR, which is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Registry. You can think of it like Docker Hub, but it's Oracle managed. Using the build pipeline, we will then deploy the Docker image, and in the build job, we will make the connection to our database. So basically, the connection with the database will be on the runtime, so you don't have to hard code the value in your containerized image. Overall, we will deploy 2 microservices in the Kubernetes. Once those are deployed, you will be able to see the endpoint, and we will extend our application using the low-code tools like Visual Builder Cloud Service, and another one is Apex. Hopefully that's easy to understand, and you get a good grip of it. But if you have any questions regarding the architecture or workshop, feel free to ask in the chat. Marcy, over to you.
Thanks, Varun. Okay, so there are 2 links that we're providing for today's workshop. You see them on the slide here, and Varun will put them in the chat for you as well. The lab guide provides the step-by-step instructions you will follow to perform the lab. You will have the lab guide available and then open up another browser tab to perform the steps in the cloud and whatever it says in the lab guide. If you need to sign up for a free trial, you can use the link provided on this page as well. If you already have an account, please use that account to perform the lab. If you have any questions, please post those in the chat, and one of the panelists and experts on the call will be able to answer. Please remember to put all the information in one question and include the region name, database version, the page and step of the lab guide where you're encountering the error message so that we can support you properly. Also, I just wanted to remind everyone to please read and carefully follow every step in the lab, and please do not skim. Each step is required for the labs to work properly. If your lab is not working, please check to ensure you followed every step before posting a question. This session is going to be recorded so you can review it again. You will find the recorded session in the Office Hours page in the next few days. Before we turn it over to you to get started working on the lab, I will turn it over to Steve, who will provide a quick demo of what you will do during this lab so you know what to expect.
Let's start by logging into the Oracle Public Cloud. Let's enter your account name along with your username and password. Once we're signed into the OCI console, let's navigate to Identity Compartments. Here we're going to create a compartment which we'll use throughout the rest of the workshop. In this case, we're creating a compartment named App Dev. Once the compartment is created, now we're going to execute the Cloud Shell. The Cloud Shell will allow us to generate PEM keys, which we'll use later to generate an API key fingerprint. So let's enter the following commands to generate the PEM keys. Now that they're generated, we're going to display them and copy them for use later in the workshop. Now that the keys are saved off in a Notepad document, let's move over to the Identity section again, and let's add an API key to your user. Let's also copy the fingerprint, which we'll use later as well. Now we're going to navigate over to the Autonomous Transaction Processing section, and we're going to create two ATP instances. Let's be sure to select our App Dev compartment first. Here we'll enter a database name, a display name. Be sure that your transaction processing option is selected. We're also going to create this on shared infrastructure. We can leave the size as default. Here we'll enter the password for the admin user. And let's click the Create button. Once it's available, let's create a second ATP instance for the user catalog. This will also have the same characteristics as the product catalog ATP instance. Now that our two ATP instances are created, we will now create an Oracle Kubernetes cluster. So let's navigate over to the developer area and select container clusters. Here we'll follow the quick create option, which will also create an Oracle VCN, Virtual Cloud Network. Here you will see that the Oracle VCN is being created first. Once created, let's close this window. Now you see that the Oracle Kubernetes cluster has been created. Now we're going to create a Visual Builder Studio instance. Let's select the developer option. Let's click the create instance. Here we'll enter a name and select the appropriate region. Now that this instance is created, you'll have access to the Service Instance Console. Let's select that. And here we're going to set up the OCI account, which will allow Visual Builder Studio to communicate with the OCI services in your account. So here we're going to enter the tenancy OCID, the user OCID. We'll select the home region. We'll use the private key that we generated earlier. We'll also use the compartment OCID, which we created at the beginning. And lastly, the object storage namespace. Let's click the Validate button to ensure our connections are successful and save them. Let's navigate back to the OCI console and let's create a Visual Builder Cloud service, which is under Platform Services, Visual Builder. Let's enter a name and select the appropriate region again. Once the Visual Builder Cloud service is created, this will conclude Lab 50 and we can now move on to Lab 100. Thank you.
So at this point, we are going to turn it over to you. Please click on the lab guide link that Varun put in the chat, and maybe Varun, you want to put it in there again in case people joined us after you put that in there. And you can go ahead and start working through the instructions at your own pace. Again, we have a number of Oracle experts on the call to help you with any questions that you have. So please go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and you will have approximately 30 minutes to perform this lab. In addition, if you have a question where you want to talk with somebody or show them what is happening, we can move you to a breakout room. So feel free to let us know in the chat if you'd like us to do that. So let's get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with Lab 1. And if you, again, haven't finished the setup lab yet, no worries. We'll give you time in a few minutes. We just want to introduce this lab and then turn you back over to working through the lab again. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Steve, who is going to give you a quick walkthrough of the next lab, which is autonomous transaction processing data structure configuration.
Once logged into the OCI console, let's navigate to the identity section and generate an authorization token for our user. Let's click Generate Token, and be sure to copy the token for use later. Now we're going to navigate over to Object Storage to create an object storage bucket. Be sure you're in the App Dev compartment first. Let's enter a bucket name. Once the bucket is created, let's upload our data pump export file we downloaded earlier from the link provided in our lab guide. Once uploaded, let's get the URL for the data pump export file, which we'll use later when loading the data. Now we will navigate over to the Autonomous Transaction Processing section. Let's select our product catalog, click on the Tools tab, and click on Open SQL Developer Web. Here, we will log in with the username admin and the password we entered when creating the ATP instance. Once signed in, we're going to execute a series of SQL commands. The first one will be to create the alpha user and grant them the data warehouse role. The next statement will be to create the DBMS Cloud credential, which leverages your cloud username along with the authorization token you generated earlier. Lastly, we're going to execute a PLSQL command, which leverages the data pump API. Here we're going to load the data pump export file into the product catalog ATP instance. Once the PLSQL command is executed, We can monitor the status of the data pump job by running the following SQL. Here you will see it's in a state of executing. Once finished, the data pump job will be in a state of not running. To validate that the data has been loaded, let's refresh the browser. Let's select the alpha user, and here we'll see all the tables that were loaded. Let's drag the products table into the SQL worksheet and issue a select command. Here we will see data within the products table. Now we'll sign out of the SQL Developer web, navigate back to the Autonomous Transaction Processing area, and let's select the User Catalog instance. Again, we'll click on Tools, open SQL Developer web, and log in with the admin username. Once signed in, we'll execute a series of SQL commands again. First, we'll create the alpha user and grant them some roles. Next, we'll create a couple tables. And lastly, we'll verify that the tables were created. Let's select the alpha user, and we'll see that there's two tables, the requests and users tables. Now, as an optional step, let's grant the alpha user access to SQL Developer Web. Let's execute the following command. Once executed, we need to change the URL from the user admin to user alpha. We'll be prompted to log back in again. This time we'll log in as a user alpha with the password that we used when creating the user. And here you'll see you now have access to SQL Developer Web as the user alpha. This concludes Lab 100.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to turn it back over to you and let you go through Lab 100 or 1 and finish the setup lab as well. So please put your questions in the chat area. We'll give you another 25 to 30 minutes to perform this lab, and if you get stuck, we're here to help you. So please let us know if you need some help, and we can put you in a breakout room if necessary. So please just ask. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. For the next lab, you will start working on your Java REST services. And so we're going to do a little walkthrough and then get you back into time to work on the lab. This one's a little longer than the other one, so bear with us, but hopefully it'll all make sense. I'm going to turn it over to Steve at this point.
Let's navigate to Platform Services Developer. Let's access the app dev instance URL. Once here, let's validate that our OCI account credentials are still valid. Now we're going to create a virtual machine template. This virtual machine template will include the following software. Let's add Docker, kubectl, OCI CLI. Let's add Python, SQL CLI, And let's click Done. Now that the template's been created, let's define a virtual machine which leverages this template. Select the appropriate region. Here we're going to select a VM standard 2.1 for the shape. Let's click Add. Now that our virtual machine's been created, let's create your first project. For now, this will be an empty project. This will take several minutes to complete provisioning. Now that the project's been created, let's add two repositories. One for the product service and the other one for the user service. Here we will import an existing repository. Let's navigate back to the project home. And let's add a second repository. And again, this one will be leveraging an existing repository which will be imported. Now that the repositories have been created, we need to configure some of the files within the repositories. The files will include the product service secret YAML file along with the user server secret YAML file. These files will include base64 encoded values for the database username, password, and database URL. To encode these values, we're going to start an Oracle Cloud Shell, and we're going to execute the following commands. And as we execute them, we'll copy them and save them for use later. Now let's navigate back over to Visual Builder Studio. Let's select the product service Git. And let's edit the product service secret YAML file. Let's select it and then click the Edit button. Here we'll replace the values with the newly base64 encoded values we just created. Be sure to commit your changes, and also remember to do the same for the user service secret YAML file within the user catalog Git repository. Once this is updated, be sure to commit your changes. And now we're going to update the app YAML file within both the product catalog and user catalog service kits. Here we'll update the image URL to include the appropriate region, storage namespace. In our case, we're using IAD, which is Ashburn, and then we'll need to change the namespace to match the object storage namespace we collected earlier. And be sure to do this for both the product catalog Git and the user catalog Git. Lastly, remember to commit your changes. Now that we've made all the changes to our Git repositories, we're going to navigate over to the build section and we're going to create a build job. This job will contain a series of steps which will generate the containers within Kubernetes. Once the job's been created, let's associate a Git repository with the job. In this case, we're going to select the product catalog service Git. Now we're going to add some steps to this build job. So let's click on the Steps tab. Let's add our first step. Our first step will be an OCI CLI. Here we'll provide the user OCID along with the fingerprint, the tenancy OCID, the private key in PEM format, which we generated earlier in the workshop, and be sure to select the appropriate region. Now we're ready to add a second step. But first we're going to switch back over to the OCI console and we're going to navigate to our autonomous transaction processing database where we're going to collect the OCID for the product database. Click the copy option and use this in the next build step. So let's click Add Step. We're going to add a Unix shell step. And in this Unix shell step will be an OCI command, an OCI CLI command, which will retrieve the wallet from the autonomous transaction processing database product. Next, we're going to navigate back over to the OCI console, and we're going to generate a second authorization token for use in the next build step, which will be a Docker login. So let's enter the appropriate description. Click the Generate Token button, and be sure to click Copy. We'll navigate back over to Visual Builder Studio, and we'll add the next step, which will be a Docker login. Here we're going to enter the appropriate registry host. Be sure to enter the correct region. We'll enter the username, which includes the namespace and username. And the password will be the authorization token. Next, we're going to navigate back over to the OCI console. We're going to access the developer area and select registry. And we're going to create two public repositories which will hold the images for our product and user catalog services. These Repositories will be made public. Now we're going to navigate back over to the Visual Builder Studio. We're going to add another step for Docker push. Sorry, Docker build. Here, this will build the images, which will later be pushed to the OCIR registry. Once the build is done, we'll add a step for Docker push. And lastly, let's navigate back over to the OCI console to the OKE section. Here we'll navigate to our cluster. We'll click on the Access Cluster button and we'll copy the kubeconfig commands. Once copied, let's navigate back over to Visual Builder Studio and let's add a step for Unix shell. And this will build the Kubernetes containers. And let's save our build job. Now that the build job has been configured, let's click the Build Now button. This will take a few minutes to start. Once completed, we can navigate over to the build log and verify that we had a successful build. If we scroll to the bottom, we'll see our container running with an IP address, along with a successful command or status. Now let's navigate back over to the build area again. We're going to create a second job for the user service. Here we're going to copy our first build we just created. This will save us time. Let's select the Docker product build. Once created, we need to now edit some of the steps. But first, we need to select the appropriate Git. So let's change it from the product catalog Git to the user catalog Git. Let's click on the steps. Here we need to change the OCID from the product catalog autonomous instance to the user catalog autonomous instance. We'll change the name here for the wallet file to user. Be sure to change it in both places. Let's also change the name of the image from product to user. Again, that's in 2 places as well. And lastly, let's change from the product service secret YAML to the user service secret YAML file. Be sure to click the Save button. Now we're ready to execute our build. Let's click Build Now. Once completed, we can navigate over to the build log. Scroll to the bottom, we'll see the user service container running with an IP address along with a successful command.
Okay, so we're back, and hopefully that helped you to understand what you're going to be doing in Lab 2 as well. So let's go ahead and go to lab time. You now have 20 minutes left in this workshop, and if you don't finish, that's fine. I'll give you some links to go to ask questions after the workshop as well. But go ahead and continue on, and if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A or the chat. Thank you. Hey everyone, I just wanted to let you know we have about 10 more minutes left, but before we end today, I just wanted to thank you for attending today, and we have a number of resources that you may want to jot down. I put them in the chat. We have a monthly series, which is actually not on the slide. It's called Developer Live, and the link is there. We have different topics each month. The next one in October is on MySQL. The one in November is on Cloud Native, and we'll be holding these throughout the year as well. And then you can also access the ones we've already had. We had database and Java, so the on-demand version is on that page as well. Other virtual workshops, we hold these usually twice a month and on various topics, so feel free to check out the link that you see there. And we also have our self-guided lab. So this is considered a self-guided lab. However, we are available to answer questions during the session, but we have a whole bunch of other labs available to you. So check that out as well. And then for any technical questions that you may have, we have technical folks, including the 4 that are on this call, or the 3 that are on this call, Keegan, Varun, and Wilson, who can follow up with you about any technical questions that you have after the session. So I just wanted to mention that, and we have about, say, 5 more minutes or so, so we'll hang on to answer any last-minute questions that you have, but I just wanted to thank you for attending today's workshop, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks everyone for attending today. We hope you found it useful, and hope you have a great day. Thanks so much.